The stars had always been kind to the Villani. For thousands of years they had looked up at the night sky from their beautiful moon called Orus and seen only wonder. They had never seen danger. They had never seen death falling from above. But on this day, Commander Yuna stood on the bridge of her ship and watched as 3 massive warships blocked out the stars like dark clouds before a storm. The Villani were not warriors. They had never been warriors. They were small creatures, barely reaching the chest of most other species in the galaxy. Their bones were light, and their skin was soft. Their large eyes were made for reading ancient texts, not for watching enemies approach. Their hands were made for healing and creating art, not for holding weapons. They had joined the Galactic Compact 200 years ago because they believed in peace. They believed that words could solve any problem. They believed that kindness would always be returned with kindness. They had been very, very wrong. Yuna gripped the railing in front of her as the ship trembled. The Keth Dominion had found them. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Keth. They were conquerors who moved from world to world, taking what they wanted and destroying what they did not need. They were tall and strong, with thick gray skin that could stop a blade. They felt no mercy. They knew no fear. And now, 3 of their destroyers surrounded the small Villani convoy, like wolves around sheep. The convoy was simple. 5 civilian transport ships, carrying families, scientists, and traders back to Orus after a cultural exchange on a distant world. There were no weapons on any ship. There were no soldiers among the passengers. There were only peaceful people who had done nothing wrong except exist in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yuna turned to look at her crew. There were 42 Villani on her ship, the Starlight Hymn. She could see the fear in their large, luminous eyes. Some of them were crying silently. Others were holding hands with the person next to them. In the corner, she could see a group of children huddled together, trying to be brave even though their small bodies were shaking. 12 children. There were 12 children on her ship. Navigator Hannah stepped closer to Yuna. They had been friends since childhood. Growing up together on the green hills of Orus, they had joined the space service together, dreaming of exploring the stars. Now those same stars seemed cold and cruel. Hannah's voice was barely a whisper. They are charging their weapons. Yuna felt her heart sink. The Villani had 2 hearts, and both of them were beating too fast. She looked at the main screen and saw the Keith flagship moving closer. It was enormous, covered in weapons and armor. The name painted on its side was written in the Keth language, but she knew what it meant. It meant World Breaker. A voice came through the communication system. It was harsh and deep, speaking in the common galactic language with a heavy accent. Villani vessels. You are now property of the Keth Dominion. Surrender your ships and your cargo. Resist, and you will be destroyed. You have 5 minutes to decide. Message ended. Silence filled the bridge. Yuna wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to wake up from this nightmare. But she was the commander. These people trusted her. Those children in the corner were looking at her, waiting for her to save them. But how could she save them? She had no weapons. She had no military training. She had nothing except a small ship and a crew of peaceful scholars. An old voice spoke from behind her. There is one option. Yuna turned to Site, the ship's engineer. He was old, even by Villani standards. His fur had turned white long ago, and his movements were slow. But his eyes were still sharp, and his mind was still clear. He had lived through dark times before. What option? Yuna asked, though part of her was afraid to hear the answer. Tay walked slowly to the communication console. His old hands moved across the controls. The emergency protocol. A distress beacon transmitted across all frequencies. It will reach anyone within range. Hannah shook her head. No one will come. We are in the outer sectors. The Galactic Compact patrol ships are days away. By the time anyone receives our message, we will already be dead. Out. Tay looked at her with sad eyes. There is one species that might hear us. One species that is known to answer distress calls, even in the darkest corners of space. Yuna felt a chill run down her spine. She knew what Tay was talking about. Everyone in the galaxy had heard the stories. Tales told in whispers. Warnings passed from one species to another. Humans. The Villani had never met a human in person, but they had heard the stories. Humans came from a world called Earth, a planet so dangerous that it should have killed them long ago. Their world had violent storms, extreme temperatures, deadly predators, and poisonous creatures everywhere. And yet, humans had not only survived, they had conquered their world and spread across the stars. They were called Deathworlders. Their bodies were strong and could heal from injuries that would kill other species. Their minds were strange, capable of both great kindness and terrible violence. They were unpredictable. They were dangerous. Some said they were monsters. Others said they were guardian angels. Yuna did not know what to believe. Humans are dangerous, Hannah said, echoing Yuna's thoughts. They might be worse than the Keth. Tay shook his head slowly. The Keth will kill us for certain. With humans, there is at least a chance. I have heard stories. Stories of humans answering distress calls from strangers. Stories of them fighting impossible battles to save people they had never met. I do not know if these stories are true, but I know that the Keith will show us no mercy. Yuna looked at the screen again. The Keth ships were moving closer. The timer was counting down. 4 minutes left. She thought about the children in the corner. She thought about Hannah and Tay and all the people who trusted her. She thought about her family back on Oris, waiting for her to come home. She made her decision. Send it, she said. Tay nodded and pressed a button. A small light blinked on the console, indicating that the beacon had been activated. The distress call flew out into the void, traveling at the speed of light, crying for help to anyone who might hear. The crew watched in silence. The Keth ships continued their approach. The timer continued counting down. 3 minutes. 2 minutes. 1 minute. Yuna closed her eyes. She had done everything she could. Now, all she could do was hope. Hope that somewhere out there, someone was listening. Hope that somewhere out there a human would answer. The Keth flagship charged its weapons. The Worldbreaker prepared to live up to its name. And in the cold darkness of space, a small distress beacon continued its desperate journey. Searching for a miracle, 17 minutes passed like 17 hours. Every second felt like an eternity as the Villani crew waited in terrified silence. The Keth ships had stopped their approach, but only to enjoy the fear of their prey. The commander of the Worldbreaker had sent another message, laughing at their distress beacon. Call for help all you want, little creatures, the Keith voice had said. No one is coming. No one cares about you. You are alone. Yuna had not responded. She had simply stood at her post, watching the screen, refusing to give up hope. Around her, the crew held each other. Some prayed to the old gods of Oris. Others simply closed their eyes and waited for the end. Hannah stood beside Yuna, her hand resting on her friend's shoulder. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. Then something happened. The sensors on the Starlight Hymn detected a disturbance in space. Something was coming. Something fast. The crew looked up at the screen, expecting to see more Keth ships arriving to join the slaughter. But it was not a Keth ship. A vessel dropped out of hyperspace directly between the convoy and the Keth fleet. It appeared from nothing, tearing through the fabric of space like a knife through cloth. The ship was small, much smaller than the Keth destroyers. It was old and battered, covered in scorch marks and patched armor plates. It looked like it had been through 100 battles and survived, one through luck and stubbornness. The name painted on its hull was written in strange letters. Hannah's translator took a moment to process them. The Wandering Star. For a long moment, nobody moved. The Keth ships stopped their preparations. The Villani crew stared in confusion. Even the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Then a voice came through the communication system. It was different from the harsh Keth voice. It was calm, almost casual, speaking in accented but clear galactic common. This is Captain Parkday of the Wandering Star. I received your distress call. What is the situation? Yuna felt her heart's jump. Her hands trembled as she pressed the communication button. Words tumbled out of her mouth, fast and desperate. "Captain, we are a civilian convoy from Oris. We have no weapons. We have no military. The Keth Dominion has surrounded us. They will kill us all. We have 42 people on board. We have children. Please, please help us." There was a pause. Static crackled through the speakers. The Keth flagship was turning toward the new arrival, its weapons still charged and ready. Then the human spoke again. His voice was quieter now, but there was something different in it. Something harder. "How many children?" Una swallowed. 12. 12 children." Another pause. When the human spoke again, his voice had changed completely. The casual tone was gone. What replaced it was cold and sharp, like a blade being drawn from its sheath. "Stay behind me. Do not run. Whatever happens, do not interfere. I will handle this." Before Una could respond, the communication channel switched. The human was now broadcasting on an open frequency, speaking directly to the Keth. "Keth vessels. This is Captain Park Day of the Wandering Star. You are threatening a civilian convoy under my protection. You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons and leave this sector. After that, I will consider you hostile, and I will respond with appropriate force." The Keth flagship responded immediately. The voice was filled with amusement and contempt. "Human. You dare threaten the Keth Dominion? You are one small ship against 3 destroyers. You are nothing. You are less than nothing. Turn around and fly away, little human, before we crush you along with these pathetic creatures." The human's response was simple. 25 seconds. Laughter erupted from the Keth communication channel. Multiple voices joined in, mocking the lone human ship. Is this a joke? Does this primitive creature not understand basic mathematics? 3 ships against 1. We have enough firepower to destroy a small moon. What can one human do? 15 seconds. The laughter died down. The Keth commander's voice became angry. "You are insane. Truly insane. Very well, human. If you wish to die, we will grant your wish. All ships, prepare to fire. Destroy the human first. We will deal with the convoy after." The Keth destroyers began to move, turning their weapons toward the wandering star. The small human ship did not move. It simply sat there in space, waiting. Una watched the screen with horror. She had called for help and a human had answered. But now that human was going to die because of her. One small ship against 3 warships. It was impossible. It was suicide. "He is going to die," Hannah whispered. Tay shook his head slowly. "Watch." 5 seconds, the human said. The Keth flagship fired first. A massive beam of energy shot through space toward the wandering star. It was a killing blow, meant to end the fight before it began. But the human ship was no longer there. In the blink of an eye, the wandering star had moved. Not slowly like normal ships. Not carefully, like sensible pilots. It had moved like a wild animal, throwing itself to the side with impossible speed and impossible angles. The Villani crew gasped. Such maneuvers should be deadly. The force of acceleration should have crushed anyone inside the ship. No species could survive those kinds of movements, but humans were not like other species. The wandering star came alive. It danced through space like fire in the wind, spinning and diving and climbing. The Keth ships fired again and again, but every shot missed. The human ship was too fast, too unpredictable, too crazy. Then the human began to fight back. His ship was small, and his weapons were not powerful. But he did not need powerful weapons. He aimed for the places that mattered. He hit the sensors of one destroyer, blinding it. He struck the engine of another, crippling its movement. He flew so close to the 3rd ship that the Keth could not fire without risking hitting each other. It was not a battle. It was chaos. Beautiful, terrible chaos. Una watched with wide eyes. She had never seen anything like this. No Villani could fly like that. No Villani could think like that. This human was fighting 3 warships alone. And he was winning. The Keth commander's voice screamed through the communication channel. Kill him. Kill the human. What are you waiting for? Fire! Fire! But his ships could not land a single hit. The wandering star was everywhere and nowhere. A ghost made of metal and fire. And somewhere inside that ship, a human captain smiled. The real fight had only just begun. Captain Parkday had not always been a wanderer among the stars. Once long ago, he had been a soldier. He had worn the uniform of the Terran Defense Corps and carried a medical kit instead of a weapon. He had been a combat medic, trained to save lives on the battlefield while death raged around him. He had served on the frontier during the border wars, when humanity was still young among the stars and everyone wanted to test their strength against the Death Worlders. Those years had left marks on him that would never heal. He was not a tall man by human standards. His black hair was cut short, and his face was lined with the traces of old stress and older memories. His eyes were dark and usually calm, but those who knew him well could see the shadows that lived inside them. He was 43 years old, but some mornings he felt like 100. After the war ended, Day had left the military. He had sold everything he owned, bought an old cargo ship, and flew away from Earth without looking back. He did not want to fight anymore. He did not want to hold a weapon. He did not want to watch people die while he tried desperately to save them. He just wanted peace. But the galaxy had other plans. The first time he answered a distress call, it was an accident. He had been passing through a quiet sector when his communication system picked up a weak signal. A mining ship had suffered an engine failure. The crew was running out of air. No one else was close enough to help. Day had hesitated. He had promised himself he was done with dangerous situations. He had sworn he would live a quiet life. But the voice on the radio was scared. It belonged to a young man, probably not even 30 years old. He was crying for someone to save him. Day had turned his ship around. He saved the miners that day. It was dangerous, and it was stupid, and he almost died when their engine exploded during the rescue. But he saved them. All 7 of them. And when they looked at him with tears in their eyes and thanked him, something inside Day shifted. He could not escape who he was. He was a man who answered when people called for help. It was not logical. It was not smart. But it was who he was. Since then, he had answered many calls. He had pulled survivors from burning ships. He had rescued hostages from pirates. He had brought medicine to plague-stricken colonies and food to starving refugees. He had fought when he had to and run when he could not win. He had earned scars and lost sleep and gained nothing except the knowledge that somewhere out there, people were alive because of him. His ship, the Wandering Star, was his home now. It was old and beaten, patched together with spare parts and stubbornness. But it was fast when it needed to be, and tough when it had to be. It had never let him down. He was not alone on his ship. On was his co-pilot. She was younger than Day, with sharp eyes and quicker reflexes. Her hair was pulled back in a messy tail, and she always wore the same worn jacket no matter where they went. She had been a smuggler once, running illegal goods across dangerous borders. She had been caught, served time in prison, come out with nothing but her skills and her attitude. Day had found her on a space station, picking fights with men twice her size. He had offered her a job. She had laughed in his face. 2 days later, she had appeared at his ship with a bag over her shoulder and said, "I guess I have nothing better to do." She had been with him for 5 years now. She complained constantly, insulted him daily, and claimed she only stayed because the food was decent. But whenever he got into trouble, she was right there beside him. Cursing and shooting and refusing to let him face danger alone, Sung was their engineer. He was a quiet man who spoke more to machines than to people. His hands were always covered in grease, and his mind was always solving some mechanical problem. He had worked in the shipyards of Mars before an accident cost him his job. The company said it was his fault. The scars on his back told a different story. Day had met him in a repair shop, arguing with the owner about the correct way to fix a plasma conduit. Sung had been right. The owner had been wrong. Day had offered him a job on the spot. Sung rarely smiled, rarely joked, and rarely showed emotion of any kind. But he kept the Wandering Star flying, when by all logic it should have fallen apart. And once, when Day had nearly died from a gunshot wound, Sung had sat beside his bed for 3 days straight, refusing to eat or sleep until his captain woke up. These were his people, his family, the only family he had left now, as the Keth ships surrounded them, and weapons fire lit up the void. The three of them worked together like parts of a single machine. Yoon sat in the co-pilot chair, her hands flying across the controls. She was launching countermeasures, jamming enemy sensors, and calling out targeting solutions faster than any computer could process. 2 missiles coming from the left, she shouted. 3 more from above. These idiots really want us dead. Day pulled the ship into a spinning dive, dodging all 5 missiles by margins that should have been impossible. His body screamed in protest as the force of the maneuver pressed him into his seat. Any other species would have passed out. Any other species would have died. But humans were built different. Sung Day called into the internal communicator. "How are we doing?" The engineer's voice came back, calm despite the chaos. "Hull integrity at 82%. Shields are fluctuating. Reactor is running hot, but she will hold." "She always holds." Day smiled grimly. "Good, because I need you to do something stupid." "I am ready. Overload the forward shield capacitors. When I give the signal, dump all the energy into the next enemy we pass. Turn their own shields into a bomb." Then Sung's voice came back, almost amused. "That is very stupid. That is why I need you to do it." "Understood. Ready when you are." Yoon looked at Day with wide eyes. "You are insane. You know that, right?" Day gripped the controls and aimed the ship toward the nearest Keth destroyer. "I know," he said. "But those are kids out there. 12 of them. Scared and alone and waiting for someone to save them." Yoon cursed under her breath. Then she strapped herself in tighter and checked her weapons. "Fine," she said. "Let us be insane together," the wandering star screamed toward the enemy. Carrying 3 humans who had no right to be heroes but refused to be anything else, the battle became something that the Vellani would talk about for generations. They would tell their children, and their children would tell their children, and the story would grow with each telling. But even the most exaggerated version would never capture what it was truly like to watch one small human ship take on the might of the Keth Dominion. Commander. Yuna stood frozen at her post. Unable to look away from the screen, her crew gathered around her, their fear slowly turning into something else. Something like wonder. The wandering star flew like nothing they had ever seen. It did not move like a ship. It moved like a living creature, wild and unpredictable and impossible to catch. The Keth fired everything they had, filling the space with beams of energy and clouds of missiles. But they hit nothing but empty void. The human captain was not just fast. He was clever. When the first Keth destroyer moved to cut off his escape, Day did not run. Instead, he flew directly toward the massive warship at full speed. The Keth captain hesitated, confused by this suicidal charge. That hesitation cost him everything. At the last moment, the wandering star pulled up sharply, skimming along the surface of the destroyer so close that its hull scraped against the enemy armor. As it passed, Sung released the overloaded shield energy. The burst hit the Keth ship's sensor array, exploding in a blinding flash that fried every detection system on that side of the vessel. The destroyer was blind. The Keth captain inside screamed orders, but his crew could not respond fast enough. Without sensors, they could not aim. Without aiming, they could not fight. Day did not give them time to recover. He swung the wandering star around in a tight arc, coming up behind the blinded destroyer. His ship's weapons were not powerful enough to punch through Keth's armor, but the engines of any ship were always vulnerable. He fired a concentrated burst at the destroyer's main thruster, and the blast tore through metal and machinery. The first destroyer began to drift, its engine dead, its crew in chaos. 1 down, 2 to go. The second destroyer moved to intercept its captain, having learned from his comrade's mistake. This one kept its distance, firing from range, trying to limit the humans' ability to get close. It was a smart strategy, but Yoon was smarter. She had been watching the second destroyer's firing patterns, counting the seconds between each shot, noting the slight delay in their targeting system. Keth's technology was powerful but old. It had weaknesses. Day, she said, "Give me control of weapons." "I have an idea." Day did not hesitate. He transferred weapon control to her console without a word. Yoon waited. The destroyer fired another volley. She counted 1, 2, 3. There, that tiny gap. When the weapons were recharging, she fired. Her shot was not aimed at the ship itself. It was aimed at the missiles the destroyer had just launched. Her blast hit the lead missile, and the explosion triggered a chain reaction. All 6 missiles detonated at once, creating a massive fireball that temporarily blinded the destroyer's sensors. In that moment of blindness, Day dove. The wandering star shot under the destroyer, scraping so close that sparks flew from both hulls. As they passed, Yoon fired again, this time at the ship's main communication antenna. The blast severed the array cleanly. Now the second destroyer could not call for help. It could not coordinate with the flagship. It was alone. But the Keith were not finished yet. The flagship, the Worldbreaker, had been watching. Its captain was the oldest and most experienced of the 3. He had seen many battles. He had crushed many enemies. He would not make the same mistakes as his subordinates. The Worldbreaker turned all its weapons on the wandering star at once. Not one beam. Not 2 beams. Dozens of beams crisscrossing through space like a net made of fire. There was no way to dodge. There was no room to escape. Day made an impossible choice. He flew directly into the barrage. "Sung," he shouted. "Everything to forward shields. Everything." The engineer did not question. He redirected all power from weapons, from life support, from everything except the engines. For 10 seconds, the wandering star became a flying fortress. All of its energy focused into one direction. The Keth beams hit the shields. The ship shook violently. Warning alarms screamed. Smoke began to fill the bridge. Yoon was thrown from her seat. Day bit through his lip from the impact. But they did not die. The shields held just long enough for the wandering star to pass through the barrage and emerge on the other side. The ship was damaged. Its hull was breached in 7 places. Its shields were gone. Its weapons were barely functioning, but it was still flying. And now it was behind the Worldbreaker. The Keth flagship was massive, but massive things turned slowly. By the time it began to rotate, Day had already reached its vulnerable stern. The flagship's rear was less armored than its front. Its designers had never imagined an enemy would get behind it. They had never fought human before. Day fired everything he had left. Missiles, energy bursts, even the emergency flares. All of it slammed into the flagship's rear thrusters. The explosions were not big, but they did not need to be. They only needed to damage the engines. The Worldbreaker lurched. Its propulsion failed. It began to spin slowly, out of control. The Keth commander's voice came through the communication channel one last time. It was no longer arrogant. It was afraid. "This is not over, human. The Dominion will remember this. We will find you. We will destroy everything you love. You have made an enemy today that will never forgive." Day's response was quiet. "Then come find me. I will be waiting." The Worldbreaker activated its emergency hyperspace drive. It vanished in a flash of light, leaving behind 2 crippled destroyers and a field of debris. Silence fell over the battlefield. On the starlight hymn. The Villani crew stared at the screen in disbelief. The impossible had happened. 1 ship against 3. 1 human against the Keth Dominion, and the human had won. Yuna's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. Around her, her crew began to cry too. But these were not tears of fear. These were tears of relief. Tears of joy, tears of gratitude. Day's voice came through the communicator, tired and strained, but steady. "Convoy, this is the Wandering Star. The enemy has withdrawn. You are safe now." A pause. Is everyone okay? Yuna could barely speak. Her voice came out as a whisper. Yes, yes, we are okay. Because of you. Another pause. Then, very quietly, the human spoke again. Good, that is all that matters. The journey to Aura Station took 3 days. The wandering star flew alongside the convoy the entire way, its damaged hull visible through every viewport. Smoke still leaked from its breached sections. Its lights flickered on and off, but it never left their side. During those 3 days, the Villani learned things about humans that they had never known before. They learned that humans needed sleep, but could go for days without it when others depended on them. Captain Day did not rest until the convoy reached safe space. He stayed at his controls for over 60 hours, his eyes red and his hands shaking, but his course never wavering. They learned that humans felt pain but continued anyway. Yoon had broken 2 ribs during the battle. Sung had burns on his arms from a ruptured conduit. They wrapped their wounds with simple bandages and kept working. They learned that humans formed bonds quickly and deeply. When the wandering star finally docked at Aura Station, the 3 humans stepped off their broken ship and immediately asked about the children. Not about payment. Not about repairs. They wanted to know if the children were safe. Yuna met them at the docking bay. She had prepared a formal speech of gratitude, the kind that Villani tradition demanded. But when she saw Day walking toward her, limping slightly and holding his side, all her prepared words vanished. She simply hugged him. It was not a Villani tradition to hug strangers. Their culture valued personal space and formal greetings. But in that moment, Yuna did not care about tradition. She wrapped her small arms around this strange, wonderful creature and cried into his chest. Day froze for a moment, surprised. Then, slowly he hugged her back. "Thank you, Yuna," whispered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Day did not say anything. He just held her while she cried. Later, after the convoy had been processed and the families had been reunited with their loved ones, Yuna found Day in the station's medical bay. A Villani doctor was treating his injuries. He had burns on his hands from overheated controls, a deep cut on his forehead from flying debris, and severe bruising across his entire body from the forces of the battle. The doctor was amazed. "These injuries should have killed you," she said. "The force readings from your ship's black box show accelerations that would have crushed any Villani. How are you still alive?" Day shrugged. "Humans are stubborn." Yoon, sitting in the next bed with her ribs being wrapped, laughed. "That is one word for it." Yuna waited until the doctor finished. Then she approached Day and sat down beside him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Yuna asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the battle. Day looked at her. "Why? What? Why did you come?" "You did not know us. We could not pay you. The chances of survival were almost 0. You had no reason to risk your life for strangers." Yuna's voice trembled. "Why did you answer our call?" Day was quiet for a long time. He stared at the ceiling, thinking. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "When I was a soldier, I saw a lot of death. I saw good people die because help did not come in time. I saw children cry for their parents who would never come home. I swore that when the war ended, I would never fight again." He paused. "But then I heard your voice on that distress call. You were scared. You were desperate. And you had children with you." He looked at her, his dark eyes filled with something deep and painful. "I could not ignore that. No matter how much I wanted peace, I could not pretend I did not hear you. That is not who I am." Yuna did not understand. The Villani live by logic, by calculation. They weighed risks and benefits and made decisions based on reason. What Day described was something different. Something irrational. "Among my people," she said slowly, "we would call that foolish." Day smiled. "Among mine, we call it human." Sun, who had been quietly reading in the corner, spoke without looking up. "It is both." Yuan threw a pillow at him. The next morning, the wandering star was ready to leave. Villani engineers had worked through the night to repair the worst of the damage. They had refused any payment, saying that the ship had earned its repairs with the blood of its crew. The entire station gathered to watch the departure. Thousands of Villani lined the observation decks, looking at the small human ship with something new in their eyes. It was not fear. It was not suspicion. It was respect. Una stood at the front of the crowd, Hannah and Tay beside her. The 12 children from the convoy had insisted on coming too. They pressed their small faces against the glass, watching the ship with wide, admiring eyes. One of them, a little girl named Nari, tugged on Eunice's hand. "Commander, will the humans come back?" Una looked at the wandering star. Its engines were warming up. Its navigation lights were blinking. In a few moments it would leave, and these strange, wonderful creatures would disappear back into the stars. But somehow, she knew the answer. "If we ever need them," she said softly, "I believe they will." The wandering star lifted off from the docking bay. It turned slowly, its patched hull catching the light of the distant sun. For a moment, it hung there, as if saying goodbye. Then Day's voice came through the station's speakers, broadcast for everyone to hear. "People of Oris, thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your repairs. And thank you for giving us a reason to fight." A pause. The galaxy can be dark and cruel. But as long as there are people willing to call for help, there will be people willing to answer. That is a promise. The wandering star's engines flared. The ship shot forward, accelerating toward the edge of the system. In seconds, it was just a bright among the stars. And then, with a flash of light, it was gone. Silence hung over the observation deck, then slowly. The little girl named Nari raised her hand and waved at the empty space where the ship had been. "Goodbye," she whispered. "Thank you," round her. The other children did the same. Then the adults. Then everyone. Thousands of Villani, waving at the stars, thanking 3 humans they would never forget. And somewhere out there, flying through the endless void, Captain Parkday smiled. His ship was battered. His body was tired. His future was uncertain, but he had answered the call. That was what humans did. They answered, and they would keep answering, until the stars themselves burned out, because that was who they were. That was what made them human.